Now that everyone's finished stuffing their faces with Thanksgiving turkey, the holiday season has finally started in earnest. For some, this is the season of merry and cheer, but for others, this may be the season of stress and seasonal depression. Not sure who needs to hear this, but it may be about time you renewed that Lexapro prescription. For me, though, it's a season of nostalgia. A season where I find comfort in hearkening back to simpler times. Back when the world seemed less complicated and the looming presence of bills and check engine lights and a never-ending series of financial obligations weren't even in the back of our minds, but rather an abstract concept that existed well beyond our scope of reality. So, what better way to indulge in that nostalgia than to play one of those old Final Fantasy games? No, not that one. Not that one either. No, further back. Getting there? There we go. Final Fantasy, or Final Fantasy I if we need to be specific, was the game that started it all, launching a franchise that would go on to sell more than 200 million games, oh my god. But, ironically enough, Final Fantasy's release couldn't have come at a more uncertain time for its developer. Square Enix may be a multi-billion-dollar corporation now, but before that $750 million merger to pick up the Enix part of its name, and before it even went by Square Soft, Square was a ragtag game developer trying to make a name for itself while struggling to compete against decades-old companies like Sega, Atari, and Nintendo, who'd already secured a powerful foothold in a very niche market. By the time Final Fantasy, originally slated as Fighting Fantasy, had begun development, it was already looking like this would be Square's last hurrah, hence one of the reasons for the game's name change. So, they gave it everything they had, and, well, the rest is history. But that was back in 1987. Standards have changed, and the medium has evolved. There are more than a few games from that era that still hold up today, but that's in a large part due to the timeless simplicity in their design. RPGs, on the other hand, are not so simple. Compare any two RPGs released in the last 20 years, and you'll see two very different games. Some are action-oriented, some are strategic, some have stats, some have no stats, some have too many stats, some have dialogue options, some are sandboxes, some are linear, but all of them are different for their own eclectic reasons. So, what does that mean for the original Final Fantasy? Well, that's what I wanted to find out, since I never actually played the original before, mainly on account of being under the age of 40. Full disclosure, this is the Pixel Remaster version, which from what I understand is more or less the same game, just with better sprites and a handful of quality of life improvements. So, if you want to come at me for not playing the real Final Fantasy, then cool, I guess. Feel free to link me your 23-hour solo Thief speedrun in the comments. Also, I am using two visual mods, one to get rid of that god-awful font, and another to change the character sprites, because I want my guy to look like the pretty man on the cover art. Can you really blame me? Anyways, once you pick out your party composition and name your guys, the game cuts straight to the chase, in a way that I wasn't really expecting. Final Fantasy games are known for having very long and drawn-out opening segments, but there was something refreshing about how this one wastes no time with getting to the point. You and your three buds show up at the door of some king's castle who tells you that you're special and he needs you to go rescue his daughter after she was kidnapped by some guy named Garland. So you go there, save her, and then the king's like, cool, now go kill these 4 bad guys, cleanse the crystals they're guarding, and save the world. Then that's it. You're off to go play the game, so go beat it. There's a sense of openness in the game that you don't really see anymore. Beyond the king telling you to go cleanse the crystals of earth, fire, water, and wind, you don't get much more guidance than that. Instead, you're directed by following the confines of the map and piecing together hints from NPCs. In that regard, it makes the game feel like a genuine adventure. You're not chasing after quest markers, but rather seeking out landmarks and following whatever directions you can pick up here and there, all while fighting a lot of random encounters. Your first foray into what this game is really about, though, comes when a king cursed by Astos, the king of the Dark Elves, directs you to retrieve his crown from the first real dungeon of the game. Which is, not fun. The dungeons in this game are designed to be confusing mazes that'll have you repeatedly wandering into dead ends and getting turned around, all while peppering you with countless random encounters that are also not fun. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you. I love turn-based combat, but it has come a long way in the past 4 decades. The vast majority of the random encounters are not hard to beat by any means, but they are very unengaging, and unless you're in a town or on the airship, they are everywhere. Combat is the most bare bones of bare bones. You can attack and use magic. Defending is an option in the remaster, but more often than not, you're better off just trying to deal as much damage as possible. Spells are handled in a very D&D style manner, which I think is kind of interesting, where instead of an MP bar, you get a certain number of spell slots that replenish upon resting at an inn or using an item. In the Pixel Remaster, you do have the option to forget spells and reslot new ones, which is good because in the original, you could just straight up permanently gimp yourself if you weren't careful. Elemental weaknesses and resistances are a thing, but enemies are, for the most part, so weak that it doesn't even matter. The real issue is that they're almost always going to get 1 or 2 shots in on you before you can take them down. So, unless you are vastly overleveled and can outspeed them, they will eventually chip you down just by merit of attrition alone. This makes Final Fantasy I as a whole more of a resource management game. You have to navigate through several confusing labyrinths while enemies pop up and force you into using what resources you have available, be it your HP, your spell slots, or your items, until eventually one of 3 things happen. You die, you leave to rest and resupply, or you finish the dungeon. Success in this game is not really determined so much by skill or party composition, although that can help, but rather how prepared and stocked up you are going into it. But once you get the crown from the dungeon and bring it back, you find out that the king is actually Astos in disguise, and this leads to one of the game's more interesting fights. Not because it was particularly fun, but because it's one of the few fights in the game that rewards the player for being clever. Astos is a very hard boss for the level you fight him at. He spams powerful spells that are no doubt going to shred through your party if you face him head on. However, he uses nothing but magic spells, meaning that if you cast Silence, he can't do anything. Unless he opens the fight by casting Death on your ass. Come on, 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 come on! Oh, are you fucking kidding me? Motherfuck you! But once you beat him, you've pretty much seen Final Fantasy I's entire gameplay loop. Navigate the map while following hints from NPCs, some being more esoteric than others. Go into a dungeon, fight the boss, leave the dungeon, rinse and repeat until the 4 crystals are cleansed. Sometimes it'll spice things up a bit, like having you seek out some obscure random item to make an NPC talk to you and guide you to the next part of the game, but these detours always end up leading you back to the loop. The 4 fiends you fight guarding the crystals are there. If you go into the fights well-stocked and well-equipped, then they shouldn't be much of an issue. The real problem is the dungeon crawls that lead to them. Tiamat's especially, which does that annoying thing where there's a bunch of doors that you have to choose from, and choosing the wrong one sends you back, and you have to try again and again and again until you figure it out through sheer trial and error. Yeah, I hate those levels. But once you cleanse the 4 crystals, you get led back to the Chaos Shrine, the same place you fought Garland at the beginning of the game. Then you hop into a portal that takes you back 2,000 years into the past, You fight through the Four Fiends a second time, and then confront our old friend Garland again, where you learn he's actually a time traveler who is perpetuating an endless cycle where the heroes kill him in the present, which sends him back 2,000 years into the past for some reason. And now that the heroes are here, Garland assumes the full power of chaos, so he can kill them, after which point he'll wait 2,000 years for the present-day version of the heroes to show up and kill him again, sending him back into the past, and setting up the infinite time loop. Not sure what the purpose of that is, but it does make for a neat little detail in a meta sense that every time you fail to beat the final boss, it isn't just a game over, but a canonical event that occurs within the loop. So that's kind of cool. I like it. It's neat, confusing, but neat. And Chaos is fucking hard. He just spams random heavy-hitting attacks. Sometimes he'll heal himself for a shitload of health, completely nullifying everything you've done for the past 10 turns. But undoubtedly the worst thing he can do is cast haste on himself, which means that if he does a physical attack against you, you're fucked. Theoretically, you should be able to dispel it by casting slow on him, but every time I tried it, it just missed. Not sure if it's because he was immune to it or because I had bad luck. Anyways, once you do finally beat him, the game ends with the cycle being broken by preventing it from ever happening in the first place, meaning that the world will never be plagued by darkness, so there won't ever be a need for heroes, but their legend will remain. Even though the story is really anemic, due to the time it was made in, this is still a pretty interesting ending, especially when accounting for the time it was made in, because this was during a time when you'd be lucky if the ending of a game gave you so much as a congratulations screen. It's also an ending that has been played out in many different iterations throughout the Final Fantasy series. From 6 losing all of the magic in the world, to 16 having the hero become a figure of myth and legend that no one can recall for certain if they were real or not. Yet, for all the charm it has, during my playthrough, I started to pick up pretty early that the vast majority of the challenge that comes from this game is more of a circumstance of archaic game design rather than a challenge of skill. Maps are often unintuitive and intentionally confusing. Hints are vague, and there are many times where you can't reasonably be expected to figure out where to go next without a lot of trial and error, which is made all the more tedious by the endless random encounters. With that said, I can't fault the game for being designed the way it is. Final Fantasy is barely over a decade shy of qualifying for an AARP card. This is just how games were back then. Even so, in spite of that, by the time I finished playing it, I felt quite charmed by the game overall. Final Fantasy I is a relic from a bygone era. Back when you couldn't just go on the internet to figure out where the hell to go next. You had to experiment for yourself, and maybe talk to your friends at school to see if they figured out something that you hadn't. While the game may have only taken me 11 or so hours to beat, it was with the help of a guide, as well as being able to turn off combat encounters so I could navigate through some of these mazes without getting my ass chewed off. But I can see how back in the 80s and early 90s, a game like this could really feel like a grand and fantastical adventure. I can only imagine how many stories there are of people who made several ventures into a dungeon, drawing out maps each and every time so they could better navigate it the next time around. Or how someone was stuck on the game for weeks before their friend finally told them about that one obscure square in the middle of the desert where you can run into the caravan to pick up a key item. This is an aspect that I feel is often forgotten when looking at older games from a pre-internet world. Through these obtuse puzzles, and what we would now consider bad game design, it encouraged the players to go out into the real world and share their experiences with one another, to learn from each other, to think outside the box and utilize not just what they had in their game inventory, but in their actual real-life inventory. pencils and paper to chart out maps, or keep track of which store sold which spells, or just simple notes to help remember hints from NPCs. This is the sort of thing that just doesn't happen anymore, because, well, it can't happen anymore. In an age where you can fit all the information in the world inside of your pocket, this type of experience just can't exist, because people will just pull out their phones and look up what to do next. That's what I did, and it wasn't until I beat the game that I realized I'd kind of robbed myself by doing that. But even so, looking at the game as it exists today, in the world it exists in today, it is still no doubt a Final Fantasy game. While the story itself is very to the point, there is a lot of thought that went into the setting. There's prophecies, technologically advanced ancient civilizations, allusions to a wider history throughout the world, and a somewhat convoluted motivation for the villain. You can see all the seeds this game planted that would one day grow into the monolith of a franchise that the series has become. And I do think it's really worth being able to go back and see where it all started. In the wake of the Final Fantasy VII remakes, there have been a lot of voices calling for more AAA remakes of older Final Fantasy games, with Final Fantasy VI being among the most prominent of them. But at the risk of being a little controversial, I kinda would really like to see a modern remake of this one, of the original Final Fantasy. One of the problems with remakes is that they are always having to fight between staying true to the original and exploring new territory to keep things interesting. This creates a lot of friction between player expectations and developers wishing to take creative liberties. Yet a remake of Final Fantasy I could, in many ways, circumvent this issue entirely, by merit of the fact that its story is almost non-existent. Developers could go in almost any direction they wanted in adapting it. They could add entire new locations and plot lines to the game if they wanted to. So long as they hit the few key points that are present in the original, then it could be a faithful remake and something entirely new. And I think this game deserves that. As I said, the world has evolved so much since this game came out nearly 40 years ago, and it can't realistically be experienced in the same way the developers intended for it to be. So I think that seeing this setting revisited with modern sensibilities could be really cool, and I'd love to play that game. Now, if only something like that were to happen.
There was a knight
Wait, what
who
the
left on
fuck?
the same journey as you, but never returned. His name was Garland.
Hold on, no.
Good.
No.
I would be grateful if you looked for him.
No
Chaos.
fucking way.
And who are you?
We're here to kill Chaos.
No.
Prophecy's very own warriors of light.
No fucking way. No.
Three.
No, you're fucking
He
kidding.
always wore
Holy
such
shit.
splendid armor.
Oh my
with a
god,
helmet
this
that
looks
was
so dumb.
terrifying to behold.
It's Garland.
No. I become chaos.
Oh, man. Oh, this is gonna be so fucking stupid, isn't it? Hello everyone, thanks for watching. I originally wanted to also cover Stranger of Paradise in this video, but I'm still in the process of collecting footage for it. So, if you're among the few people who are watching this at the time of its release, then I'll have the next part out in about a week from now. In the meantime, though, feel free to like and subscribe if you'd like to see it when it comes out. However, if you're from the future and watching this video, you can see it by clicking somewhere over here. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share about the video, feel free to leave your comments below. I took last week off for the holidays, but going forward I should be back to weekly videos again. So until then, see you next time.